The year was 1838. In Crawford County, Arkansas, a child was born into a world of chains. His name was Bass Reeves, and like millions of African Americans of his time, Bass entered life as someone's property, enslaved by a wealthy landowner named William Steele Reeves. Life on the Reeves plantation was merciless. From the moment he could walk, young Bass was put to work. At first, small chores, carrying water, tending to animals, cleaning tools. But as he grew into a tall, broad-shouldered boy, his tasks grew heavier. He plowed endless rows of cotton under the burning southern sun. He carried sacks so heavy they bent his back before his time. And every day, he saw his enslaver and overseers reminding him of his place. But Bass was no ordinary child. Even in bondage, he carried himself with quiet strength. Neighbors whispered that he was unusually quick with his hands, sharper in his eyes, and stronger than boys twice his age. He had the gaze of someone who saw more than the world wanted him to. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, Bass was barely in his 20s. The Confederacy called upon every resource it had, including enslaved men. Bass was taken along by his enslaver's son, Colonel George Reeves, to serve as a personal attendant. He cooked, cleaned, and cared for the colonel's horse. But the war was brutal. Bass marched through mud, heard the thunder of cannon fire, and watched men fall screaming on the battlefield. It was during these years that fate intervened. Legend says Bass and Colonel Reeves had a violent argument. Some say over a card game. Others claim it was over respect. The fight escalated until Bass struck his master. Knowing the punishment would be death, Bass ran. He slipped into the night, his heart pounding, leaving behind slavery forever. He fled westward into Indian Territory, land that today lies in Oklahoma. There, among the Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole peoples, Bass found shelter. For the first time in his life, he was free. Life among the tribes was not easy, but it was transformative. Bass learned to live in harmony with nature. He studied how to track footprints in the dust, how to move silently through forests, how to hunt deer and buffalo with precision. He mastered the art of riding a horse bareback, firing a rifle with deadly accuracy, and reading the signs of weather in the sky. More than that, he learned languages. Bass became fluent in Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole dialects. It was a gift that would later make him invaluable as a lawman, but at the time, it was a means of survival. Imagine the scene. A young black man, once enslaved, now sitting at a tribal campfire. The air filled with the smell of wood smoke and roasted meat. He listens as elders tell stories of battles and spirits. He joins hunters on long treks, sleeping under the stars. The wilderness, once frightening, becomes his teacher. Years passed, and Bass Reeves grew into a man shaped by hardship and freedom alike. Tall, imposing, with a rifle always close at hand, he was no longer the boy in chains. He had become a survivor of both war and wilderness. By the time the Civil War ended in 1865, Bass had forged himself into something few men of the frontier could equal. He returned to Arkansas, not as a fugitive, but as a free man, ready to begin a new life, though destiny had much more in store for him. The trail was silent, but silence on the frontier was never peace. It was the kind that pressed against your ears, heavy and waiting, broken only by the creak of leather and the hollow thud of a horse's hooves on dry earth. Boon Carter rode with his head low, the brim of his hat shadowing eyes that hadn't closed in 2 nights. The desert stretched endlessly, sand, rock, and the memory of blood spilled on this same ground years ago. He had vowed never to ride this way again, yet fate had dragged him back. The buzzards knew before men did. They circled overhead, dark specks against the blazing sun. And soon Boone found what they had been waiting for. A wagon, torn apart, horses gone, wheels splintered like matchwood, the canvas top shredded with arrows sticking out like broken teeth. Scattered belongings lay in the dust, dolls, boots, pots, each one a fragment of a life cut short. And then came the silence again. No cries, no fire, no gunshots, just the echo of what had happened. Boone dismounted slowly, his hand brushing the worn grip of his revolver. His boots sank into the soft dust as he walked closer. He had seen death before, too much of it, but what he saw here made his chest tighten. The family lay in the shade of the broken wagon, a man with his arms still spread wide, as if trying to shield the woman beside him. A child's small hand clutching at her mother's dress, lifeless but still clinging. Boone pulled his hat low. He muttered a prayer he hadn't spoken since boyhood. Words felt hollow in the desert air, but it was all he could give them. Then movement. the faint crunch of sand behind him. His revolver was in his hand before thought could catch up. He spun, the sun blinding, and saw a shadow dart between rocks. Another, then another. Apache. But they didn't charge. They circled, just far enough to keep him guessing. Faces painted, bows ready, eyes sharp as hawks. He counted at least 6. Maybe more. Boon's jaw tightened. His horse shifted nervously, sensing the trap. A voice carried across the hot wind. Low, sharp, commanding. He couldn't make out the words, but he didn't need to. He had been in enough fights to know the tone. They weren't here to scare him. They were here to finish the job. Boon holstered his revolver, slowly raised his hands, and spoke into the emptiness. I don't want no trouble. I'm just passing through. The circle tightened. Arrows glinted in the sunlight. For a long breath, the desert itself seemed to wait. And then, from the rocks above, came a shout. Not in Apache, but in broken English. Go! Leave this place! The warriors hesitated. One lowered his bow. Another shifted, uncertain. And then Boon saw her. A young woman standing above the trail, her hair braided with feathers, her eyes hard as flint. She was Apache, but something about her gaze was different. Less like a hunter, more like a judge. She shouted again, and this time the men obeyed. Slowly, reluctantly, the warriors melted back into the rocks, leaving only the whisper of dust behind them. Boon stood alone by the ruined wagon, his revolver heavy in his hand, his heart heavier still. Why had she spared him? Why had she stopped them? And more importantly, what did it mean? As the sun bled red into the horizon, Boon knew one thing for certain. This land was not finished with him yet. Night fell fast on the desert. One moment the world was painted gold. The next it was swallowed in violet and black. The stars came alive like cold fire scattered across the heavens. Boon Carter made camp beside the wrecked wagon. The dead lay covered now, buried as best he could in shallow earth. He wasn't a preacher, but he whispered words for them again. Words he hoped would travel farther than his voice ever could. The fire cracked low. His horse snorted softly. But the silence, it never stayed empty. He felt eyes on him, the way a man feels the prickle of a rattlesnake near his boots. Then she appeared. The Apache woman who had spared him earlier stepped into the firelight. Her braids caught the glow, her gaze sharp as a blade. She stood tall, unafraid, though the shadows clung to her like armor. Boone's hand went for his revolver by instinct, but he stopped. Slowly, carefully, he lowered it back. If you're here to finish me, best get it done, he said. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but something colder. You bury dead. White man does not bury Apache kills. Her English was broken, but clear. Boone swallowed, unsure what answer would keep him alive. They weren't mine to leave, he muttered. She studied him for a long moment. The fire popped. Finally, she stepped closer and tossed something at his feet. A pouch, worn leather, tied with sinew. Boone bent and picked it up. Inside were herbs, dried and pungent, mixed with something metallic, powdered round fine. Medicine. You ride sick, she said. Dust in your chest. Drink with water. Live. He froze. She had seen the rasp in his breath, the way he coughed into his sleeve when no one watched. Somehow, in the span of moments, she had read more of him than most men ever had. Why? He asked, his voice rough. Why help me? Her eyes flicked to the graves he had dug. You kill Apache. Many. I know. But tonight you give honor. For that, you take gift. Her tone was iron, her gaze steady. She wasn't forgiving him. She wasn't forgetting. But she was measuring him, weighing him like the desert weighed every man who dared ride it. Boone turned the pouch in his hand. A gift from someone who should have been his enemy. A gift that felt heavier than any bullet. When he looked up, she was already stepping back into the shadows. Wait, he called. She paused, just long enough for the fire to catch the edge of her face. What's your name? For a heartbeat, she was still. Then she spoke, barely above a whisper. Nayeli. And then she was gone. The desert swallowed her whole, leaving Boone alone with the fire, the graves, and the weight of a gift he had not deserved. He sat in the dust, staring into the flames. For the first time in years, the anger inside him shifted. Not gone, not even dulled, but changed. Confused. And Boon Carter hated nothing more than a question he couldn't answer. The desert never forgave. It only waited. Patient, silent, cruel. Boon Carter rode at dawn, the medicine pouch tied at his saddle. He hadn't touched it yet. Pride was a stubborn thing, and his pride had nearly killed him before. But each cough tore deeper into his chest, a reminder that his body was no longer the weapon it once was. The trail narrowed into a canyon, walls of red stone towering on either side. His horse's hooves echoed in the hollow, each step louder than the last. He felt the trap long before he saw it. A stone rolled down from above. Then another. Boone pulled the reins tight. The canyon was death if someone controlled the high ground. And someone did. Figures appeared on the ridges. Apache warriors, bows drawn, rifles glinting in the rising sun. The same men from the wagon massacre. He recognized their paint, their eyes. And this time, Naeli wasn't here to stop them. The leader stepped forward, a broad-shouldered man with feathers trailing from his braid, scars burning across his chest. His voice carried like thunder. "You," he shouted in English. "Boon Carter, killer of our people. Today, we end your shadow." The name hit Boone like a hammer. They knew him. They knew his past. Every raid, every burned village, every body left in the dust. It had reached their ears. His reputation had ridden faster than he ever could. Boone raised his hands, but his voice was steady. "I didn't come here for blood." The warrior snarled. "But blood comes for you." An arrow hissed down, striking the dirt inches from his boot. His horse reared, and Boone barely held on. He could feel the noose tightening, the canyon walls closing around him. For a heartbeat, he thought of drawing his revolver, going out in a blaze of fire. One last stand, like so many men before him. But something inside resisted. Naeli's eyes. Her gift. The graves he had covered with his own hands. "No," he whispered to himself. "Not like this." Then the shot rang out. Not from him, from above. One of the warriors staggered, clutching his side. Confusion rippled across the canyon. Another shot cracked, sending stone chips flying. The ambush broke into shouts and chaos. From the ridge to the west, a small figure darted into view. Rifle smoking, braids flying. "Naeli," she shouted something sharp in Apache, her voice cutting through the confusion like a whip. The warriors hesitated, torn between fury and obedience. Their leader cursed, eyes blazing with fire, but even he lowered his bow. Slowly, reluctantly, they pulled back. Boone sat frozen in his saddle, staring at the girl who had just saved his life. Again. Naeli climbed down from the ridge, her rifle slung across her back. She walked straight to him, unflinching. "You should be dead," she said coldly. Boone swallowed, his throat dry. Wouldn't be the first time. She didn't laugh, didn't smile. She only looked at him like a storm about to break. "They want vengeance. They will not stop. Not tomorrow, not next moon, not next year. You cannot ride far enough." Her words cut deeper than any blade, because he knew she was right. For the first time in a long time, Boon Carter felt the weight of something heavier than guilt. He felt the shadow of vengeance itself, rising behind him, growing larger with every step of his horse. And he wondered if this desert would ever let him leave alive. The desert sky bled crimson as the sun sank low, spilling fire across the horizon. Boon Carter rode slow, every hoofbeat echoing like a drum of war. His chest burned with each breath, the sickness clawing deeper, but he refused to show weakness. Pride still rode with him, even when strength was gone. Behind him, the canyon had closed. The Apache warriors were still out there, shadows on his trail, hungry for vengeance. He knew they would not stop, not until his blood watered the sand. And yet, he kept riding, because some men aren't chasing survival. Some men are chasing something they can't name. At a ridge overlooking the valley, Naeli waited. Her rifle slung across her back, her stance firm as stone. She didn't greet him. She only studied him, as if she already knew the truth he was carrying. "You cannot outrun them," she said. "They will hunt until your bones are dust." Boone dismounted, boots sinking into the dry earth. He tied the reins loose, as if he knew he wouldn't ride far again. "Then let him come," he rasped. "A man can't choose his enemies. But maybe he can choose where he makes his last stand." Naeli's eyes narrowed. "You think death is honor?" Boone looked out over the valley, the dying sun painting the land in blood and gold. "I don't think anything," he said quietly. "I just know the desert don't let go of men like me. Never did, never will." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then, without a word, Naeli stepped forward. She placed the medicine pouch back into his hand, pressing it against his chest. "You fight, but not alone," she whispered. Boone stared at her, searching for meaning in her eyes. Was it mercy, respect, or something else entirely? He couldn't tell. But in that moment, he felt the desert shift, as if even the land itself was watching. Then came the sound. War cries, rising like thunder from the canyon below. The Apache warriors, relentless, fierce, unstoppable. Boone holstered his revolver, every motion calm, deliberate. He pulled his rifle from the saddle, checked the chamber, nodded once, as if to himself. "This is it," he muttered. The last ride. The valley filled with shadows as the warriors advanced, their figures black against the burning horizon. The air trembled with the sound of hooves, the cry of vengeance carried on the wind. Boon Carter stood tall, rifle in hand, his silhouette cut against the fire of the setting sun. For the first time in years, there was no anger in his eyes, only a strange, quiet peace. Whatever happened next, the desert would remember, and so would she.